was really apparently you know, go get him kind of guy. He's just, you know, let's not even talk about it. Let's just go do it. You know, really active person. But he was really pushing for the you know, the success of the new system, which went down in game console history. I would argue that it's probably Sega's best loved system, even more so than the Genesis.
Yeah, it didn't sell that well necessarily.
Yeah, but it's got a reputation.
I own one, and I still love this system. Originally called the Katana, it came out as the Sega Dreamcast.
Mm-hmm.
The Dreamcast was a... I loved this video game system. The controls were really responsive, the graphics were amazing, the sound was phenomenal, it had a great video game library. It hit the market in 1999. It had 128-bit graphics. It was way ahead of its competitors.
Mm-hmm.
As far, again, I mean, that was the story of Sega the whole time, right? Whenever the consoles came out, they tended to be ahead of whatever their competitors were offering on the market at the time.
Mm-hmm.
It had 16 megabytes of memory, which to us today sounds really tiny, but at the time was really significant. And it actually had a built-in modem. It was the first video game console to have a built-in modem, 56 kilobits per second modem, but it was the first one to have one. So it was actually designed to allow you to have online
Mm-hmm.
capability and play online games.
Mm-hmm. They had
and have a web browser as well.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I didn't realize they had a web browser.
Yep. Well, it was what wasn't native. It wasn't hardwired into
Oh, okay.
it. You had to have the disk.
Oh, okay. Well, they did have developers. You know, they had Capcom, Midway, Namco, the usual arcade suspects. They didn't have Electronic Arts, who I think got very frustrated with having to do that. They having to deal with Sony's up and down. Sega's up and downs.
Yeah. Mostly downs.
Mostly downs. So they actually went out and purchased another company to develop sports games. And from what I understand, Virtual Concepts, which was the name of the company, did pretty well with sports games.
Virtual Tennis was amazing. That was one of the games I owned, and
Yeah.
it is still owned. I still have this console. It was also kind of neat because you could one of the ways you could hook up the console to your system was through coax cable.
Mm-hmm.
So you would actually use coax cable into the Dreamcast and coax cable out from the Dreamcast to your television. So it wasn't using like the composite cables that a lot of other systems were using.
Mm-hmm.
And it also meant that I could hook up more video game systems to my television because it was one less port that would be taken up by the machine.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now I understand too that this was a very productive time in the company's history for coming up with new franchises. I believe Soul Calibur. This is about the time that Soul Calibur came out.
Soul Calibur, another great game. Oh, I've got that one too. Crazy Taxi, great game.
Exactly. And the thing is though that even after the 9999 debut and the big launch, and the great games, it just didn't go.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure why. Maybe it's the marketing strategy of the company. Sega. See, I keep doing that. Game companies that start with S for 200. Sega of Japan and Sega of America did not necessarily agree on marketing strategy,
right,
or how to bundle things, or the kinds of chips should be in the machines.
They had to compete against PlayStation coming out with the PS2 and Microsoft making the debut with the Xbox.
And Microsoft had approached Sega as well with the idea of including Windows CE on the Dreamcast, and they said no. But why were they so interested in the game market?
Yeah. Well, as it turns out, that
really
Sega kind of shot itself in the foot on that one. And let me close off. Let me talk a little bit about something else that you could tell where other companies took some inspiration from Sega. If you look at the old Dreamcast controller, it bears a resemblance to the modern Xbox controllers. It had the triggers. It had a pretty wide controller form factor. There was an analog joystick on there. It also had a slot for memory cards. In fact, the memory cards had little screens on them. And you could actually have mini games that would pop up on the screen on your card that would be part of the bigger video game you're playing on the screen. And each game would have its own little individual special graphics that would pop up on your memory card. I loved that. It was just such a neat thing. It was added value for your games. But yeah, it ultimately, this system also did not last the test of time. And in 2001, January 2001, Sega made the decision to get out of the console market entirely and just concentrate on game development.
Yep, stopped actually producing Dreamcast in March of that year, and you know, they've done pretty well releasing some games since then.
Sure.
Super Monkey Ball, anyone?
Great game.
Yeah, it's a great game, and it's, you know, it's made its way to mobile gaming devices. You know, we didn't even talk about Sega's mobile gaming devices at all, but you know, it's available for mobile phones and other things and platforms, I should say. And yeah, I mean, they're known now as a software developer. They remerged all their developing strategies into one unit, so it's a much leaner company than it was before. A lot of the Sonic games, you know, even Sega's biggest star, I've heard mixed reviews on the Sega Sonic games that have come out in the last few years.
Yeah.
So it's just it sort of reminds us of Sega's glory days without giving us the great speed and action that we've all come to know and love.
Yeah. So if you guys have any Sega stories you want to share, or perhaps there's another game company you would like us to cover. You know, we've talked about Atari, we've talked about Sega.
We have a couple others on the list already.
Yeah,
of course,
yeah. We'll probably we'll have to do an episode about Sony. We'll have to do an episode. We have to do one on Nintendo.
We might have to do one on the Dreamcast itself because we kind of cut that short.
Yeah. It's this podcast has gone really long, but the Dreamcast was a pretty phenomenal system. If you ever do have a chance to maybe pick one up at a used game store and you know it's going to work, go ahead and give it a try. I was really impressed with it. The graphics, of course, don't hold up to PS3 or Xbox 360 quality, but they're pretty impressive, even when you consider what their big competitors were. So anyway, you can let us know on Facebook.